Good evening from Los Angeles. My name is Charlie Coker. I'm the Executive Director of Asia Society Southern California. And I'd like to welcome you to the fifth installment of our fifth program for our 11th installment of the U.S. Asia Entertainment Summit. We're very happy for you to join us as we discuss three perspectives on the U.S. China media world, as well as celebrating our game changer, the world-renowned pianist Lang Lang. As I mentioned, this is the fifth program that we've done this week. And as we've adjusted in the world of COVID-19 and the pandemic, we've moved all of our programs online. And we're just very pleased that you have taken the opportunity to join us. So the first fireside chat this evening will be between Lindsay Connor and Ellen Eliasoph. Lindsay Connor is a member of the Asia Society Advisory Board, as well as a member of the Summit Committee and a dear friend and colleague. He is the partner and entertainment group leader for Manatt, and an amazing accomplished attorney in the entertainment world, and has done major deals, including with the Perfect World deal, Slate deal with Universal, and various other deals throughout his long career. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Lindsay and Ellen. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Pleasure to be here. Thank you to the Asia Society. Thank you to Ellen Eliasoph for being with us tonight. This is supposed to be a fireside chat, so I am in fact sitting by my fireplace and ready to have a conversation across the Pacific with Ellen Eliasoph, who is truly one of the pioneers of the China-Hollywood partnership. Ellen was arguably the first Western entertainment executive in China. She set up the Warner Brothers office in China, and she was Warner's senior executive. She brought in films like The Fugitive, Matrix, and others, and also supervised production of Chinese entertainment content as well. She went on to lead Village Roadshow Asia, and then Perfect Village, and has now made a very interesting segue back to her roots in production with Ning Hao's production company. So Ellen, welcome to the show, and love to ask you to tell us about your new job.
Okay, happy to not see you all or see you all, as the case may be. Well, so I'm here in Beijing, and it's kind of like a different world, actually, particularly in our industry. I came back here to work as a producer with China's most dynamic, young. He still counts as young. He's only 42, even though he's already one of China's leading directors and one of China's leading producers. His name is Ning Hao. And he invited me to come back and work with him on his movies, but also to help him manage his incubator company that has signed 14 of China's most outstanding upcoming young directors who are really the future of the industry. So we're both directing, producing, and talent searching. And it sounds like a strangely optimistic thing to be doing at this point. In 2020, to be doing this may sound crazy, but he didn't just start this. His company, Naughty Monkey, has been operating successfully for a number of years. And one of China's leading films that you probably would have heard of, called Dying to Survive, was one of their first breakout hits, and really showed the power of young filmmaking in the genre that Ning Hao himself started as a director, which is the Black comedy, very down to earth, very local, people that you know, many of whom are losers like you, that has really become the backbone of the entertainment industry, the entertaining aspect of the film industry in China. It's become the most important homegrown genre and a huge box office driver. And most of these young directors are going to be working in either that sort of comedy, satire genre, but a number of them are also making films that are already being invited to global film festivals like Berlin and Cannes, and you'll be able to see some of those next year. So it's a very good mesh. So that's, the environment I'm working in. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the China market, where it is right now, because, yeah, go ahead.
No, I think we're interested to hear it, and let me expand on that just a little bit. Tell us about the China market, but from your unique perspective, where does China stand today in the global film industry as an economic power and as a storytelling power?
Good question. So, we were all saying for the last 10 years that someday, soon, China's box office would become the #1 box office in the world. And because of COVID, that's actually happened. That's not a great thing to win the prize because of a disaster. But I want to read you some box office numbers because this would be a very interesting sampling of where China stands. Okay. So China has not had a great number of import movies this year, but China has had a number of blockbuster local releases. So just as a comparison, Tenet was released in China and made 69 million US dollars. China's long delayed war movie, which was set to be the Saving Private Ryan of China and really make its mark on the industry, which, as Lindsay knows well, it had a difficult journey through censorship. It's called 800, was released this year and made $470 million at the box office in China, thereby not only reviving the box office, but also saving Huayi Brothers, because Huayi Brothers, if this movie didn't work, their whole company was gone. I mean, that was an amazing thing. That was not a propaganda movie. It was a really well-made, touching war movie. Couple of other interesting facts. Mulan only made $42 million in China. The anthology sequel to the anthology that came out last year, which was called My Country, My People, the anthology that came out called My Country, My Hometown made $424 million. And this is when you put this into perspective, this is at a time when they are still limiting the number of seats that can be sold in the cinemas. So obviously China is the #1 box office in the world this year. What's going to happen next year? We don't know for sure, but we do know that if there were import movies being released in China, which they're not, because so many of the big blockbusters that were supposed to be released this year have been delayed globally. So The Eternals, for example, is not releasing, I believe, until 2021. And a number of other Marvel, DC franchise type movies have been held back. So we'll be seeing what happens when everything is kicking into gear. Early next year, of course, we have the Chinese New Year period, which is late January, early February, which normally makes up about 25% of the annual box office in China just during that 2-week period. And there's a stellar lineup for that period of Chinese movies. We will see then what happens when these blockbusters come in. I think China's going to lead the world in box office for the years to come. That's just my surmise. Yeah.
Ellen, do you see Chinese movies expanding beyond tremendous success in China to take on the rest of the world's box office anytime soon, or do you think these films will be primarily successful in China?
I think when Chinese directors and producers about 8 or 10 years ago stopped praying for an international box office success for their movies and actually just focused on building their marketplace and making movies for the marketplace, that really didn't become, it's really not on their radar screen to try to make something that is a worldwide global success. But I think that there's going to be a fairly organic development going on as the Chinese film quality is still not where it would need to be globally successful. And the main reason for that is not in technical issues, it's really in storytelling. And I've discussed this with Lindsay before. It's just a very interesting difference, is that Chinese storytelling still doesn't have that sort of 3-act structure that we're used to, that really started with Greek tragedy and went all the way through to the entertainment industry in Hollywood and sort of flowed through to the world. And, you know, I'm not saying that that's the only way to tell a story, but that seems to be the generally accepted way that audiences like to consume stories on the big screen and even on the small screen, although those stories are chopped up into different time frames, but they still have that sort of arc. So Chinese storytelling is more like a road trip. It's sort of starting from Journey to the West, which has been told umpteen times in so many different television shows and films that, you know, every time I hear that somebody else is making another Monkey King movie, I like start to slit my throat. But then you see that, no, what they're really doing is going back to the storytelling genre that they know best, which is the road trip. And the road trip is really entertaining, especially when they tell it in their inimitable way of having all these random, crazy, silly things happening along the side of the road. So it gives the audience a lot to look at, a lot to experience. But when you want to take a road trip movie and export it, it doesn't really work that well unless it's just the most fantastic road trip you've ever seen. So when we work with writers in China, Chinese writers, you know, they are tackling subject matters that do have the potential to be very good 3-act structures. And I think Dying to Survive, if any of you haven't seen it, you should see it. That is a real global movie. It really does have that challenge, that struggle, and a resolution at the end that actually takes it to a level of humanity and universality that has rarely been seen in a Chinese movie. I think it didn't get widely released just because of all the business issues that we all know about, which are that Chinese movie companies don't really understand very well how to interact with foreign buyers and how to do all the legal work that's required to get their movies properly released. But that will come, and there will be more movies like that over time.
Well, they can be reassured on both sides of the Pacific that the lawyers are willing to be their business and legal guides in doing that.
Exactly.
It's been my pleasure. It's been my pleasure to represent a number of Chinese companies doing business in Hollywood, including Perfect World and Huayi Brothers and others. And I think that journey across the pond is very doable. Certainly the waters have been roiled recently by the larger U.S. China relationship. What do you see, Ellen, from your perspective in Beijing? What's going to be the relationship over the next year or two, do you think, between Chinese and Hollywood companies in the film business? Are the companies going to be doing business, or is everybody going to be kind of retreating to their own areas of influence?
I think the era of lots of capital flows back and forth between Hollywood and China has kind of come to an end, in the sense that I think China doesn't need capital from Hollywood. And as I just discussed, although they would love to have external markets, it's not something that they're relying on to build their industry successfully. I think Hollywood is still going to find its best success in China at the box office. And so the studios just have to keep making good movies, securing releases for them in China, and marketing them well in China. I've always been very gloomy and pessimistic about co-productions, and for the current foreseeable future, I am a little even more pessimistic than I used to be, because I think that right now there is a sensitivity in terms of what type of subject matters would be right for, particularly for U.S. China cooperation. For example, there's a number of fantastic war stories that everyone has been wanting to tell, whether it's been, the Doolittle raid, or whether it's been Flying Tigers. Everybody's been trying to develop those for years. But right now is probably not the time when either side wants to kind of get into the jungle of trying to parse what you can and can't say about U.S. China military or diplomatic cooperation. So I think both sides are going to be a little wary of that. I'm also a little bit chastened, to note that one of the reasons that Mulan failed in China, which was widely discussed in the Chinese media, is that this was a bunch of foreigners telling a Chinese legend. There were no key creative members on the Mulan team who were Chinese. They weren't even Chinese American. And the screenwriters weren't Chinese. So the whole thing is like, wait a minute. We've got this vast, unexploited gold mine of stories and settings and legends and people and all this stuff. Why wouldn't our own creative people be telling these stories? And so I think there's also going to be some hesitancy in terms of working with international key creative personnel for the time being. That doesn't mean that there will not be technical cooperation with cinematography, visual effects, music, all of that stuff. But I think for the time being, it's going to be a little harder for foreign directors in particular to be coming to China to direct movies.
So with COVID and the delay of the release of the major U.S. blockbusters, China has not seen big U.S. films, big Hollywood films coming there, and it may be a few months yet before they do. What do you think what do you think the receptiveness of the Chinese box office will be? Are they starved for Hollywood product, or have they now moved on to more of the domestic product in China?
They love Hollywood product. They can't wait. Everybody's talking about, particularly the Eternals, because it was directed by Chloe Zhao, who grew up in China and studied in London and the U.S. and has gone on to become probably one of the most outstanding global directors, which is quite extraordinary that in 1 year she has a movie that won Venice and will probably win Best Picture, but she also has a big Marvel franchise that that's going to be releasing soon. People are really excited about that. And, the directors that they love, I mean, they love David Fincher, they love Steven Spielberg, they love all the directors like the Russo brothers. They're crazy for this stuff. So that's not a problem. The problem really is going to be the US release schedule. Very few movies want to release in China before they release in the US, but that is now happening to some degree, and it may have to happen because you can't hold these movies back forever. So yeah, no problem with those movies.
We were having just a moment of technical difficulty there. Hearing you, but I think the point is that in the end of the day, the U.S. release schedule is what it is, and hopefully it will work into a Chinese release schedule. We know we can't release in China before we release in the U.S., but there are other instances where we do release in the U.S. well before a Chinese release.
Aquaman was released in China a few days before it released in the U.S. And I'm not sure about Tenet. I mean, Tenet didn't get much of a release in the U.S., did it?
Well, it got as much of a release as COVID and the openings of theaters would allow.
Right.
I mean, it was the big release, this summer, but it didn't have competition because the other studios weren't willing to take a chance.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. But the market here is waiting with high anticipation for the Hollywood movies to start coming back. So
Hollywood then still has one of the two things it needs most from China, which is markets. I mean, it's long salivated over the Chinese market, and that's going to be there in your view.
Absolutely.
There was a time when the other thing Hollywood wanted from China was money, and there was a lot of money that flowed. But I have a sense from what you're saying that is less likely to be forthcoming, at least not in the quantity that was there before.
Right. I mean, it's not as if the Chinese film industry hasn't suffered over the last few years as well, because first there was the tax scandal in 2018, where, a lot of people had to not only pay tax penalties, but a lot of companies had to clean up their act financially. And that actually put some companies out of business. And then we had the 2019 transition of the Chinese film censorship process from being at the level of the Film Bureau to being at the level of the propaganda department of the Communist Party. And there was so much confusion about what that was going to mean for Chinese films. And it's taken about a year to sort that out. We now know that these films, including Zhang Yimou's movie, 1 Second, which was supposed to play in Berlin in early 2019 and then was suddenly pulled, it's actually now going to be released next week. So I think that people have now sorted out what it actually means to be making films in the new environment where some quantity of the films will be telling historical patriotic stories, and those films will be made, but they will not be the only ones that get made. And there is enough room in the box office for all of them to coexist. But in the middle of this kind of sorting things out, I think the interest of Chinese investors, or even, basically Chinese investors to try to buy U.S. studios or participate in, U.S. slate deals has probably diminished. But you probably know a lot more than that because you deal more with slate deals. So, but that would be my sense. Yeah.
So one last question. I think we're going to have to wrap up soon, but for some period of time, it seemed like the holy grail of China-Hollywood partnerships would be to design movies that would be successful on both sides of the Pacific. And obviously, Mulan and the Kung Fu Panda and others were attempts to do that. Should we stop looking for that holy grail? Should Hollywood just keep making the blockbusters it's used to making for appreciative audiences worldwide, including China, and China continue to build its own storytelling power? Should we give up the holy grail for now, or do you see that search still being legitimate?
I think that for genre popcorn movies like Meg, which was a huge success, because the Chinese audience understands genre movies because they've watched so many genre movies from Hollywood. So for disaster movies or for science fiction, Meg was a great example of how that can work because you're playing with and kind of goofing on the genre expectations of both sides. So that is something that I think will continue to be an opportunity for Chinese and Hollywood studios to work together.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Well, Ellen, on behalf of the Asia Society, I really want to thank you for spending time with us tonight. You are a true pioneer, but also a true survivor who has seen so much. Who has seen so much of the development of the Chinese entertainment industry and the China-Hollywood partnership. You're a great friend, a great client, and a wonderful person to speak about this. So thank you so much for sharing this time with us.
Thank you for having me. Great.
And now I'd like to throw it back to our director, Charlie Coker.
Well, thanks, Lindsay and Ellen, for an amazing discussion and an amazing perspective on the China business. For our next fireside chat, I'd like to introduce our moderator and our speaker today. Patrick Frater has had more than 20 years of experience writing about the international film industry. He's served as Asia's editor for Variety for a number of years, and also had worked with the Hollywood Reporter. He still continues to be stationed in Asia and writes continually about the film business and the media business in Asia. He'll be interviewing Zhang Miao. Zhang Miao is or Miao Zhang, or in the English way, is a seasoned film producer and distributor, and the president of Beijing Culture Media's motion picture group. He is a very experienced executive with experience not only in the China business, but also stints with Sony and Columbia Pictures. Beijing Culture has been one of the most prominent, most preeminent film producers and distributors in China, and have distributed some of the most influential films, such as Wolf Warrior 2, The Wandering Earth, My People, My Homeland, Dying to Survive, and Wolf Warrior being still the top grossing film in China of all time. And also, as Ellen mentioned, the film My People, My Homeland, has grossed over $420 million in China at box office, and since it opened on October 1st, just over a month ago. So a truly remarkable feat and a true remarkable statement about the power and the growth and the strength of the Chinese box office. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce both Patrick Frater and Miao Zhang, and they will be having an interesting discussion about the domestic Chinese business. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. We have listeners and viewers, I believe, all over the world for this Asia Society presentation. My name is Patrick Frater. I'm the Asia editor at Variety, based in Asia, somewhere between Hong Kong and Bangkok usually. And it's my pleasure to be talking today with Zhang Miao, who's the general manager of motion pictures at Beijing Culture.
Hi, Patrick.
Hello there. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to tease you with a bundle of questions that go from the macro picture down to the micro picture. So if my first questions are not about Beijing Culture specifically, we will get there, I promise you. Sure. I just wondered if we could do something that is looking back at this very strange 2020. China, as everybody knows, was the country that had to shut down daily life first of anywhere else in the world. That meant cinemas closed, I think it was January 23rd, and they remained closed for very nearly 6 months. However, the production industry started back, I think, in March or April, and has accelerated, and feels like it got back to normal much quicker. Since July, cinemas have been open in China. Box office has caught up. The restrictions, most of the social distancing restrictions in cinemas have been reduced, and now it feels like Chinese box office is very much back to normal. Can you talk us through the various different stages and the importance of those? I mean, for instance, having cinemas shut when the production sector is open is rather unusual.
Well, cinema, yes. I mean, this is a very tough year, very, very tough year for everyone, especially the ones in the film industry, of course, in other industries as well. But China has taken, I mean, all the actions possible in a very scientific way, led by the central government. So yeah, we shut down cinemas at very early of this pandemic, and for everyone in the film industry, it's a huge loss because the Chinese New Year is such a huge market opportunity for everyone, but for the bigger good for the society, we decided to shut down the cinema. After the cinema was shut down, people, my exhibitor friends called me many times a day, asked, "Hey guys, are you still making movies?" I said, "Well, yes, I'm actually am doing the prep for one of the major film this year, and yes, we're still making movies." And then they said, "Well, that's such a great relief because then we can, go back and wait for the day to get the cinema open and to see the new films to come, because this is what I think very much they depend on. It's their confidence to survive, through this pandemic, and wait for the day they can open up their cinemas and welcome the dear audience to come back." For the production side, we're actually doing one of the major films of this year called 我和我的家乡, My People and My Hometown. It's done in a very, very, I think, scientific way. During the pandemic, we have more than social distance, social distance, very strict management of the team, and we have the zero contact food delivery and equipment and everything. And we do the test, all the crew and all the filmmakers do test every week. So it's very well managed. And so during the past 6 months, I'm glad to see that the production of the China film industry are still moving forward, bring what they believe to the good product, to be the good product to the audience. So that's why when the cinema opened again in late July, we see a wonderful thing that people going back to cinema, and right. We see more and more people coming back. And during the national holiday in early October, I see it's Chinese New Year's coming back. I saw the cinemas packed with audiences. Of course, everybody's wearing masks, and the social distance is still performing, very, very well, in a wonderful way. And miraculously, I would say that the past national holiday, it's a second highest grossing national holiday in the history. So
that's remarkable. I find that remarkable in this COVID year, when Europe and America are still experiencing terrible problems with managing the disease. In China, you've got to the second highest National Day box office of all time. That I find extraordinary. Just a couple of follow-up questions. How was it that investors and producers had enough confidence that they were going to be able to shoot and recoup? Because for 6 months they had no revenue, and theatrical revenue is very important to the box office, to the mix of film industry in China. I still think it accounts for around 80-something% of total revenues for a film. So no theatrical, no revenue, but they were still investing. How come?
Well, during the past 6 months before the national announcement to reopen the cinema, it was the darkest moment of my career because, I have confidence, that everything will go back to normal. It's just a matter of time, and we're moving fast enough. And so do my friends, my partners, those great partners who's involved in my last film. They all have confidence. I don't know how we managed through it, but what I can tell you is the people around me, my partners, my filmmakers, they have confidence.
And the exhibitors, because at the time when things were being closed down, we read predictions from very senior and important companies and officials saying that large numbers of cinemas would actually close down and may never reopen. Did that actually happen?
No, as far as I know, in a national holiday, I saw at least 90% of cinemas are open.
Right.
And most of them are packed with audience. So this is what I saw, and I think, well, it's better than what we expected, I have to say.
Yeah, it looks like China's film industry has enjoyed what the economists are calling a V-shaped recovery.
Yes. Yeah.
But I wonder if you could also talk us through some of the changes that have happened to the industry. For instance, at Chinese New Year, there were a number of films which escaped the theatrical industry and went straight to streaming. Certainly the digital companies seem to be in a very strong position in China's economy these days. So has streaming and theatrical changed their balance in the industry now?
Well, yes, streaming, I have to say, on one hand, streaming is becoming more and more important to the audience as well as to the industry. But we are the believers, on the other hand, for theatrical experiences. I mean, this what has to be done. I mean, you have to plan your product in a much clever way compared to the past. We have to make good product that or drive people go back to the cinemas to experience the ride in the theaters, as well as there are some contents or a great amount of contents that is actually much suitable for online streaming. So it's not that the streaming is taking away the places for cinemas. It's just for us, we need to make more content for the next generation of moviegoers in a theater, as well as great contents for the streaming. Streaming is actually an add to the market. I mean, not something to take the profit from the theatrical market. So both of them can grow.
But it's very interesting to me to see companies like Alibaba Pictures and Tencent Pictures, who are now huge film companies, but it clearly both come from a digital background. I wonder how you see them prioritizing things going forward.
Well, these are all major players, and both of them are my great partners in what we do. They have platform. They have millions of efficient ways to reach to the audience. Whether these audience are for the streaming or for the theaters. This is the platform that make this market. I mean, the reach to the content and doing the marketing for us and give us great feedbacks of how the younger audience would consume the products. So these are great partners. They are drivers, or they are engines actually to the local Chinese theatrical market, as well as all the other market for contents.
Got it. Here's a slightly provocative question. Does China and Chinese audiences even need Hollywood movies anymore? You've been reaching record levels of box office in the last few weeks without many significant US releases.
Well, that's a very good question. But to me, I think yes. Because there is an old saying in China, saying, without hundreds and thousands of flowers, there would not be any spring. Yes, we love the products, we love the good products from all over the world, especially from Hollywood. Hollywood still represents the highest quality of filmmaking. So the local audience here, they are dying for good contents. No matter, this is from Hollywood or from local producers or local studios from China, as long as it's good, as long as they're good.
You've talked a couple of times already about making sure that the right product is reaching the audiences. Has the development process been changed as well due to COVID? I mean, I remember speaking to people in March and April and saying that they've been forced to stay indoors and stay at home for a long time, and they've learned new ways of team working, particularly at the script writing level. Is that something that is enduring now that people can actually meet again physically?
Well, this pandemic is a huge thing to everyone in the society and to every country and to every culture. So we are undergoing many, many changes after this pandemic. So the answer is yes, it changes the way people communicate, it changes the way of people, how people work together, and also it changes their taste to consume kind of products. So we're learning. We definitely see these changes. We're learning. We are rewrite our scripts to make sure that the story itself is something they can feel. They feel it is something actually they can see themselves on the big screen. So yes, we're doing that. We're working very hard to do that, and we get payback from our last film. So yes. Mm-hmm.
Great to know. Was there much financial stimulus or rescue packages from the Chinese central government for the film industry? Because this has certainly been an issue in many other countries, that they've been looking for support, financial injections to tide companies over, or to help with problems of insurance and things like that. Did the Chinese government actually need to inject money into the sector?
Yes, that's a confirmed answer. From what I have received not only the guidance of how we can manage through this pandemic, in both in terms of production and in terms of distribution, but we do receive the help packages from the government, to help our production budget and to help our marketing distribution budget. Yes, for sure.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. Got it. So I think this is the cue to actually take us through how your company has responded to all these changes we've talked about: streaming, finance, genres, and so on, and maybe even talk through some of your upcoming slate. So what have you been doing, and what is coming up next?
Yes, we not only to the company, but to me and to my team, actually going under transition period, which means we're moving from the 1.0 level to the 2.0 level, like an upgrade of a software or something like that. Because after the past, through the past 5 years of competition, bringing Beijing culture as a studio brand from no one to know to known to most of the people in this industry. 5 years has passed, the market has changed, and this pandemic gives us much more challenges than we expected, but also give us opportunities because it gives us change. People changed their way, their taste of consume the product, and the streaming is so huge, but you can still see people love to go back to the cinema as to experience the ride. So we have to change our strategy on contents. We have to pick up what kind of contents are good for theatrical market and make it better. And we need to put much more effort, than the past 5 years to really look into to make good content to go online, to go streaming. This is definitely what we need to do. So that's to change. We need to reform. We need to bring our team to the next level. So this is what we're doing now. It means more clever strategy making and decision making process. It means much faster and efficient decision making process. And it also means, much healthier way of liquidity, to manage our liquidity. So you're going to make
so please share with us what we're going to be seeing from Beijing culture in the next year or so. What's in the pipeline?
Okay, we have at least two major films coming in the next 3 months. If not, if it's not a lineup or pipeline, but two major comedy films coming to cheer up the local audience, to give them the experience of laughter and tears. So one is called the Bath Buddy. Bath is taking a bath. Buddy is, brothers and something like Bath Buddy. Okay, so it's coming in December. And then we have a major comedy coming in the hottest slot of the year, the Chinese New Year of 2021, called the Hi Mom. I don't know if this name translates into English properly, but we use English Hi Mom. But you can see it's a family comedy. It's about love. It's about a relationship between a daughter and her mom, but in a very, very interesting way, a way that you never seen it before on large screens. So yes, we have two films to come, still very busy, and we will have more coming in the next 24 months.
I think the Chinese New Year 2021 period is going to be very competitive. I wish you every luck in it. Zhang Miao from Beijing Culture, thank you very much for spending time with us today and talking to me.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you.
So Patrick and Zhang Miao, thank you so much for a really insightful discussion about the Chinese market. For our next program, we will have a fireside chat with Jesse Siskold. That will be moderated by Stephen Saltzman. Stephen is the chair for Asia, Europe, Media and Entertainment for Paul Hastings. He's a partner there and a leading entertainment lawyer, and has been recognized in Variety and Hollywood as one of the top entertainment lawyers in the United States. Stephen also is a very good friend and a member of the advisory board, as well as the co-chair of the U.S. Asia Entertainment Summit. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Stephen.
So good morning, everyone from London. They used to say that James Brown was the busiest man in show business. Now that title has been claimed by The Rock, but I'm not so sure about that. As president and COO of Skydance Media, Jesse Siskold helps to set and execute the overall strategy and growth plan for Skydance, while managing its key operations across all units. He also oversees animation production, business and legal affairs, corporate development, human resources, interactive entertainment, international distribution and co-productions, as well as television production, and manages the company's relationships across all distribution and co-financing partner relationships. So obviously a very busy individual. So I'll start this off by saying, Jesse, for those that are not familiar with Skydance's obviously very diversified media business, perhaps you can give the viewers some general background.
Happy to. Hey, Stephen, and thanks for having me today. That does sound impressive when you read the bio, but yes,
I have firsthand knowledge that it is impressive because I've seen you in action.
Thank you very much. It's worth a quick description because Skydance is only 10 years old. It was started in 2010 by David Ellison, and really just kind of caught its stride maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. So 6 or 7 years ago, we were a small little group, 10 or 12 people in a bungalow on the Paramount lot, because it really was spawned from a great co-fi relationship with Paramount. Fast forward to today, and we're over 500 people with thriving 4 content creating verticals that go from feature film, where we do both streaming and theatrical, live action television, interactive. We have 2 different interactive groups, and then animation, and always focus on high quality event level entertainment for global audiences. And more recently, we've expanded the animation group by building out a studio that's in Spain, so not too far from you, Stephen. And then what we'll probably focus a lot on today is we've bolstered our global footprint. Really in 2018, the top of 2018, we were fortunate enough to enter a partnership with Tencent, which is both a business collaboration partnership as well as an equity partnership into Skydance, and then followed that 2 years later, which you know all too well, Stephen, by a similar arrangement that we're able to strike with CJ. So really great strategic partners out of Asia, both China and Korea, and hopefully after all this, we can figure out our next partnership to do together. So,
absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about these relationships with Tencent and CJ respectively. How did these come about?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, I think we were somewhat unique in that David and I started taking trips to China probably in around 2015. And we were going there, and this is, I think, why we were unique. We were going over there without hat in hand. So we were well capitalized. We were not going over there needing capital or needing investment, which I think was somewhat refreshing. We were looking for just great partners that could provide important aspects to the entertainment business that we couldn't really grow ourselves organically in an effective way. So it started in China because prior to this year, obviously, China was the #2 box office country. And our content in particular, which is big tentpole sci-fi action adventure fantasy, was less kind of territorial centric and always really designed ideally for a global audience. So I think Lindsay talked about the holy grail of trying to find that great story that speaks to all audiences, and that is what we are still after and looking to accomplish. So, but what we didn't have is a true deep understanding of the culture in China and what they would really respond to, what may be slight adjustments even in our development, our creative process that could really have good impact. We didn't really have that. We didn't have, well, we have great feature film partners like Paramount and others. It's different than when you have a very large homegrown company that's tapped into how to properly market and really hit its audiences. And I was very struck by, well, they're not a partner of ours, but if you look at what Alibaba, for example, did on Dog's Purpose, where for a very small budget, they could reach every dog owner that had bought dog food in the last 5 days, and that kind of information, that kind of expertise would cost us millions and millions to try to get to. So large footprint and understanding of the China audience was what we were looking for. And we were fortunate to do some work with Alibaba. They are a partner on our Mission Impossible franchise, and they've been great as a marketing partner. But we just really felt in sync with the Tencent team and felt like they had not only had an expertise in really all things China media, but they at the time had 25% of the entire interactive business globally. And that is a passion of ours and something we're just looking to build. So for that one, it was a win-win, and there were great synergistic elements for them. It was a belief in Skydance and where it was going. It was also feeling like we could be a foothold for them to help translate their IP ambitions to North America, and together we could make great global content. So bit of a long-winded explanation, but then fast forward 2 years later, and we're sort of on a similar hunt, much more focused on television, I'd say, than we were in 18. I think we were more focused on everything I just described, but with more of a feature slant to it. And as you know, Stephen, we really hit it off with both the domestic players and the Korea-based players at CJ. And we thought what they were building and had already built in television was so significant that we could really be helping each other by way of not just us being the source of the IP and the creative development, and then them helping us sort of bring it to Asia. But in this case, we actually thought there'd be much more advantage to the great IP and stories that were coming out of Asia. And then we could work together to sort of globalize them, so to speak.
Sounds like obviously very, very important and critical strategic goals for having, as you said, global content, audiences, and also just the insights into what the consumers in Asia would want. But obviously these relationships, Tencent, you've had a little bit more time, CJ is newer. What, if anything, has ended up being different from your ingoing expectations, or what have you learned from your interaction with these partners?
It's a great question. Our vetting process was pretty thorough. So I think we felt like we knew each other as people, and as you draw up a great strategic plan, you draw up a great agreement, and then you hope you never have to look at it again. Right. And you hope that in
Sure.
practice, it feels as good as it felt, that moment when you toast the partnership. And that's been the case with Tencent for sure, where we've had more time to get to know each other. We've even had the unpleasant experience of having a movie that we went in together, and we learned a lot about each other through that, but we had it not work financially. And that, I think, often is a real indicator about how strong the partnership is. It's easy to high five a lot when everything's going well. It's how you kind of pull together and regroup when you take a swing on something and it doesn't go well. So with Tencent, I think it's been very positive. They're involved, in an equity level and a corporate level and sort of strategic level, but we just continue to expand our footprint within their organization. So, it started out as, hey, which movie do you like that you think you could market, right? And then it went into, hey, you know what? You have built a really nice distribution unit. We have a great movie that we're doing for Netflix, but we still hold China. Do you want to be our distributor? So we're not asking for investment, just help us promote and distribute, of which they did more recently for the old guard on Netflix. And now we are starting to expand into some of their other businesses, like China Literature, which could be a great IP hotbed for expanding into global stories. As well as have cracked our first television project, which comes out of a Chinese IP there. So shifting over to CJ, which, while that is more of a recent partnership, that has really hit the ground running. So, like I said, it was very TV geared. And in a matter of 4 or 5 months, we have 6 television shows that we've put together as a slate. I won't name them because we haven't announced them, but we're incredibly excited. 4 of the 6 come out of CJ's library, 2 of the 6 come out of Skydance's library. So that's what we had hoped, and we're getting really critical, not just IP help, but we're getting really critical creative help, which I think was our hope, but maybe not fully our expectation this soon. But so film groups working together, even though that's above and beyond a lot of what the agreement was, TV groups working together on a weekly basis. And it's been a really good symbiotic relationship on both fronts. Just one's a little more mature than the other.
Do you see an opportunity to actually kind of meld all 3, the triangle in terms of CJ and Tencent, Skydance, and working on a project all together, or would that just be too complicated?
No, I don't think it would be too complicated based on how everything's worked so far. I think the important thing for us, this is more just a philosophical issue, is, it's sort of the same reason that we don't do, what they call in our business, the sort of rent-a-system deal with distributors. What that means is we prefer our distributors to have skin in the game just like us. And so following that philosophy through, that means if everyone can bring something great to the party, everyone's welcome to be at the party. And if that means, Tencent is going to handle the games off of this great IP, and CJ is going to really run on the creative because it's going to launch in TV, and Skydance can maybe be the quarterback. I mean, that would be a dream project, and everyone could play different roles. I think where it would get a little funky, and this is not unique to CJ or Tencent, this is just partnership approach, is
Sure.
where it feels like we're needing to kiss someone in, but they're not really contributing anything meaningful. And so I think if we could figure out a great project, I'll put that on you, Stephen, a great project that you think all 3 parties would have something unique to contribute, it would be awesome. And I'd love to bring that all together.
I'll see what I can do about that.
Okay.
I'll look into the toolbox.
Okay.
So one of the things that's been discussed a little bit, particularly in the first fireside chat, geopolitics have obviously changed dramatically since your deal with Tencent. So what has been the impact of U.S.-China relations, trade war, worsening diplomatic relations on your relationship with Tencent, for example? And then probably not, but has there been anything of a geopolitical nature that has impacted the relationship with CJ?
No, totally fair question. I mean, CJ, you're right, nothing. There really hasn't been anything political that has interfered with our ability to do to accomplish the business objectives that we sought to accomplish. China U.S. I mean, that relationship has been in the news quite a bit, particularly in the last couple of years, and then really even in the last few months, when you had the TikTok of it all, and there was some flirtation around WeChat and these things, and obviously Tencent's the backer of WeChat. So there was, I know for a minute, I even have peers at other companies that have Tencent backing, and everyone was just taking a moment to make sure that this wasn't something more severe. And it wasn't. So the reality, Stephen, is we haven't really felt any impact. Now, if we were releasing movies right now during this time, in a weird way, the pandemic sort of may or may not have softened the impact, because I don't know if we were releasing movies through a lot of that dialogue from our administration, whether there would have been impact or not. I don't know. But we haven't gone through that because a lot of those antics sort of lined up with the pandemic, where we weren't pushing much through other than what was being pushed through in streaming. But what I will say is the whispers that we get are that perhaps there's a little stricter scrutiny in terms of the censorship process being applied that there may otherwise would have been. Now, I don't have great facts to base that on because we've not submitted in anything to censorship since last year. But that is the word I'm hearing. So when certain projects are being evaluated by China partners, even if they're really inspired creatively, they're taking a slightly more careful approach as to what they think they can get through, maybe than they would have a year ago. That's probably the only substantive thing I've noticed.
Do you think that, I mean, this is a question that I think has been on a lot of people's minds. Do you think the results of the recent election, Biden arguably being a little bit more Hollywood friendly, will also be will have a positive impact on this?
Without any concrete evidence, I would say yes, because just what you read over the last 6 to 12 months has not been positive. So I'm basing on what I read versus maybe what is actual. But my assumption would be yes. If for no other reason, then I think there's an interest level in having better global compatibility, in terms of the U.S. with, this isn't unique to China, I'd say with so many allies that maybe haven't felt like allies recently.
And on a similar topic, there seems to have been, certainly in the last 12 months, arguably even the last 6 months, an ever increasing politicization of content. We've seen it with Mulan, we've seen it in other instances. Does this influence creative choices, or do you feel it's just noise that should be ignored in the creative process?
So, that's a tough question. I think that it definitely should not be ignored. I also think that we are at a place, and I'm speaking globally, but I'm really focused more specifically in Hollywood because that's my day-to-day experience. I think we are in a place where Hollywood is really open and needing to be open in terms of its evolution in approaching stories that may go outside of sort of Anglo culture. I think there was an assumption that anyone could tell any story and it'd be fine. Anyone could act any role and it'd be fine. And the reality is it's not, and I think the sensitivity levels have gone up, and I think that's a good thing. I think, I'll speak for Skydance, I think we have always taken these matters very seriously. Again, under the heading of making great stories for a global audience, that means we're not necessarily looking at, hey, if we engineer this one piece, then it'll work for these guys in this country. And if we do this, we're really just trying to focus on really great stories with great character arcs that we think will evoke emotion, period. Whether you're in China, Korea, Japan, Mexico, U.S., etc. Now, the one thing I think that is we've always paid attention to, but we're paying even that much more attention to, is just making sure that we have the right perspectives in the room when we're telling the story. I mean, there's only so much that I think you can do on research. You want the folks that have really experienced these things in the room and influencing the story. And ideally in the roles, reflecting the story. So I think Hollywood has been a little cute on that in the past, and that cuteness is getting scrutinized and hopefully fleshed out. And I think that will only be a good thing, embracing cultures more fully than we have in the past.
Absolutely. Do you think that this type of politicization has made it more difficult, though, to pursue the kinds of co-productions that you had initially contemplated, in particular with Tencent?
That's interesting. I don't think so. I really don't. I haven't felt that. And maybe that's just because we've always been sensitive to these issues in our approach with them, and they've always been very honest in terms of things that we may not be thinking about and its impact on the Chinese culture, in particular with Tencent. I know we had them in for a viewing of 2 of our projects very early that they are not invested in. We just wanted their take. We wanted their take on the characters. We wanted their take on, in one of the situations, some luck symbolism, and how that might play, because a 4-leaf clover may not speak the same luck language as needs to be spoken in other cultures. So and they've been wonderful in understanding that and then providing more detail and more cultural reference points than we may not otherwise have had. So I feel like keeping the communication channel open and keeping the mindset clear that we just want to learn from each other and ultimately that will benefit the project has kept things flowing nicely there. Again, I don't think we've really felt projects they were excited about fall to the wayside because of the geopolitical situation. We have gotten some, hey, warning, this may be looked at with more scrutiny than it may have been a year ago, like I mentioned before. So just broad themes that may strike on certain political beliefs or certain historical moments. There's just things like that might get a little less of a pass than would have before.
Sure. In light of your experiences and the lessons you've learned from these relationships, doing a little crystal balling and looking forward, what do you anticipate is going to be Korea's and China's influence on the future of the filmed entertainment industry, particularly in a post-COVID environment?
I think they've already had incredible influence, but I think most of that influence has come by way of either financial impact, exhibitor impact, marketing impact, and then more recently IP impact. What I am excited to see, and I just think it's way overdue. We all can count on our hand like the obvious examples, but I'm excited to see much more storytelling talent and much more directing talent come out of those countries for global story purposes. We worked with Ang Lee. It was amazing. There are those examples that have broken through, but I feel like there's so much behind the camera talent and writing talent in both of those cultures that haven't really had their big break yet. And so I know that's something we're focused on going forward. Both of those companies have been focused on that specifically for the last year. So how do we find this dynamic, unbelievably talented director who maybe hasn't done a big tentpole project yet, but how do we get him in front of the right people so he can be mentored through, whether that means jumping in and maybe doing a television episode for us, and then that launches him into film, or her. So that's an area where I think has been completely underutilized, and we'll all be better off when that talent gets a bigger stage to play on.
Knowing that you're getting involved in other sectors as well, obviously this diversification is very important, even more so obviously in a world that's been impacted by a pandemic. is animation easier or more challenging for these types of collaborations? And what about gaming?
Right. So, look, the great thing about both gaming and animation is they have been, well, at least for us, they've been unaffected by the pandemic. Just the production process translated to homework, working at home, a lot easier, obviously, than when you have to set up a massive principal photography shoot. So that's just been a great thing from a company standpoint. The value of diversification is you have two divisions that have just kind of rolled through and haven't dealt with some of the headaches that COVID has brought. Look, in terms of how we partner in those areas, with Tencent, it's pretty natural on the interactive side. I mean, they dominate that space. They were great, even on movie that they weren't invested in. On the last Mission Impossible, they did an excellent marketing play that was in their game PUBG. It was huge for us. So there's marketing benefits that can be played through interactive. There's licensing benefits, and we're already just starting to see those break through. Animation is one that we think there's a lot of possibility. Both CJ and Tencent have started to build their own animation units. And we even had a group from Tencent come over and sort of almost have a day with the creators at Skydance just to learn. But I think some of the themes that we're working on our animation stories in particular are going to be as universal, if not more universal, than the kind of stuff we've done for live action. So one of the projects that I was mentioning to you is about luck. Another is about family is what you make of it, and by design, none of them are really in any specified territory, and you have a very diverse set of characters and cultures represented. So we're early in that process. That's our most recent division that we've started. The first film will come out in 2022, but so that's TBD, Stephen. We'll talk about it. But I think between the consumer products that spin off of that, the game possibilities, and then the movies themselves and how they'll translate both to derivative TV series and everything else, there's got to be great ways to partner with both Tencent and CJ. We just haven't formalized anything there yet on the animation side.
Just one last question sort of on that topic. A while ago, I think the catchphrase was transmedia.
Right.
Developing everything at the same time. Do you find that's part of the process in terms of, are you focused just on the film and the game comes later, or vice versa? Or is it really an attempt to develop the content for both at the same time?
Right. So look, you're hitting on the gold medal prize for Skydance. if we can finish that goal, because we are built by design to not have distribution. That's part of the reason we rely so much on core international partners like Tencent and CJ. I'm sure eventually we'll have a similar arrangement in Latin America and one in Europe. But so that's phenomenal. We don't do that. We just focus on the content creating. We don't have international sales. We just focus on the content creating. What that allows us to do is not have the tension when you have a great IP as to which division it starts in and how it's ultimately distributed. So yes, the goal is absolutely to find something, you're putting it in a wheel and you're figuring out what is the very best place for this to launch. Should it launch as a 90-minute movie? Does it need to be in theaters? Why? If not, no, it should launch as an episodic storytelling component. No, you know what? This would be great to start at gameplay and then evolve in the story. So it's always figuring out the opening launch point, and then with success of that launch point, you want to fill in the other categories. We usually don't go out and try to fill them all at once, but we have a plan that with the success of one, it rolls into the other. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. As you said, oftentimes viewed as a different holy grail from the holy grail described earlier.
Yes, absolutely. Well said.
Jesse, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for taking your time out of obviously an incredibly busy life, professional life and personal life, and balancing everything. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Charlie, everyone else that's behind hosting this.
So now I have the distinct pleasure to be giving the 2020 Asia Society Entertainment Game Changer Award to my friend and client, Lang Lang, who unfortunately could not be with us for this event. But if you stick around for another couple of seconds, I promise you, you will be in for a treat. I will never forget the first time I saw Lang Lang perform. It was on a stage in Berlin many, many years ago. He was playing a piece at a black tie charity gala. And like all the other people in the room, I was immediately mesmerized. And I'll admit immediately, I am not a classic music aficionado by any means. Within seconds, he had completely captivated everyone in this large, noisy room, and every tongue silenced as he made that piece accessible and magical for everybody, whether or not they were fans of classical music. When you experience his performances, it's not only his incredibly impressive virtuosity that obviously comes from years of dedication, but it's witnessing his passion for the music, his boundless enthusiasm, and even his sense of humor. And I luckily have the privilege of knowing that he's like this both on and off the stage. He's open-minded, crosses musical genres by playing with other musicians, from Herbie Hancock to Metallica, and he's a role model for anyone that ever picked up an instrument. He's passionate about music education, and he's passionate about how music can inspire, touch, and help people of all ages, particularly children, trying to make sure that all children have access to music and music education through his International Music Foundation. So for all these reasons and more, I'm thrilled to be giving this award to Lang Lang. Please enjoy his acceptance.
Hi everyone, it's Lang Lang here. I'm pleased to be honored as a 2020 Entertainment Game Changer at Asia Society Southern California's U.S. Asia Entertainment Summit. I wish we could be together in Los Angeles, but it's also a great pleasure to be connected virtually to people watching all over the world. During these very difficult times, I would argue that music has played a critical role in lifting spirits. It's been my life's work to serve as an ambassador for the arts and using it to bridge East and West. Music transcends boundaries. It captures human emotions that are universal, to make sure more kids to get in touch with music and explore their talent. I established the Lang Lang International Music Foundation and hope to bring music classes to every school in the world. Hope you can join us too. Now, it would be my pleasure to perform a bit of 30th variation of the Bach's Goldberg. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lang Lang, for a mesmerizing and an inspirational performance of the Bach Goldberg Variation number 30. I just want to congratulate you again. for the Asia Game Changer Award. And you truly represent everything that we hold to be dear and true. And for building bridges between the United States and Asia, nothing could be better than music and, of course, entertainment. I also like to thank all of our speakers and moderators today for a wonderful program, for Lindsay Connor and Ellen Eliasoph, Patrick Frater and Zhang Miao, Stephen Saltzman and Jesse Siskold. Thank you again so much for an amazing program. I'd just also like to thank our sponsors and our supporters for this evening for the U.S. Asia Entertainment Summit. It's been a very challenging year, and I'm very proud of how our supporters and our team has really risen to the occasion. We'd like to thank, of course, Paul Hastings and Manatt, as well as Disney Imagineering and O'Melveny for supporting us through these difficult times and for helping make this program possible. As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, we've really pivoted to the digital world in response to the pandemic and to keep our programs going and to keep the information out there and to keep trying to build bridges between Asia and the United States in the world of media and entertainment and music. I'd also like to thank our promotional partners for helping us this evening, the American Chamber of Commerce Shanghai, the Asian Business League of Southern California, Chinese and Entertainment, the Los Angeles Chinese Film Festival, the New Filmmakers Los Angeles, as well as the USC Marshall School of Business IBER MBA program. So as I mentioned, this is the fifth program of the fifth program of 6 that we're doing this week. The final program will be tomorrow night, 5 p.m. Los Angeles time, and we will be exploring the world of Japanese anime and Hollywood's new fascination with the art form. And we'll have an excellent panel, and hope that you will be able to join us for that program as well. So thank you again, and have a wonderful evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you may be in the world. Thank you again, and good night.